music.
Sing along. Know some jokes.
Frank Sinatra or something.
CP, do you tap dance?
Terry has a good singing voice.
George is desperately working fast to get this up, so because he's afraid you guys are serious.
He's chirping in Mike's ear. Don't let him start singing. Start singing.
Judy Garland musicals.
Yes, you did.
Okay, we're ready. Okay, so the hour being 6:49 PM on Monday, March 28, 2022, I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the Whole meeting. Bridget, could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Ketchmark?
Here.
Trustee Cote?
Here.
Trustee Hendricks?
Here?
Trustee Conroy?
Here.
Trustee Leclerc?
Here.
And President Garvey.
Here. Thank you, Bridget. We have two items under regular business tonight. The first is a discussion concerning the establishment of a Superintendent of Public Works position. Tim?
Thank you, President Garvey. Up on the screen is the current organization chart of our Public Works Department. We serve a population of about 19,500. And as you'll see, we have basically two non-union positions. That's the director. Then we have an administrative assistant. She is not in any way a supervisory type of position. So it's really one non-union individual that's supervising 17 union positions. Since I've been here with the village, I've always observed that's a very flat organizational structure. And as I've done a little research recently, we looked into other comparable communities to Brookfield and found that the norm is to have a little bit more of a hierarchical organization with a little more supervisory assistance over the union laborers. And so what I am proposing and suggesting and recommending is the creation of a Superintendent of Public Works position. It'd be a non-union position under the direction of the Public Works Director. And this person would do many things, but among them would help the director oversee the operations of the department. As the board is aware, the department provides a variety of public services throughout the village. One thing that is specifically lacking, I think, in the supervision of the village is our facilities. There is no dedicated person whose main responsibility is to oversee the facilities. And that's not just this building. It is this building, but including the Public Works building, the two fire stations. We operate two nursery schools. And right now, the person that oversees that is a foreman of the Streets and Alleys Division. And that's a really tall task to especially in the wintertime when there's snow on the ground and so forth, to expect that that person is going to oversee the removal of snow and ice on the streets and at the same time ensure that our facilities are being adequately cared for. So my recommendation is to create a superintendent position that would create 3 non-union positions. That is still actually well below what most comparable communities do and how they're structured, but I'm comfortable that that structure will help us a great deal in terms of not only overseeing the operations of the department, but overseeing the important facilities that we are trusted with. If the board is supportive of this, the next village board agenda will include a supplemental appropriations ordinance to create for FY22 this position.
Questions or comments from the board? And this is something that, when Tim first came, I mean, I know he talked to President Ketchmark about it a little bit, and it was just kind of feeling out how the department structure worked and everything else like this, and it's been a recommendation. I thought about bringing it forward, but I think the facilities is the number one thing. It's not just the day-to-day maintenance, it's the long-term planning, long-term maintenance, long-term planning, long-term improvements, and you know, having that job on a foreman within that has so many other duties. And I think Tim justified the position explaining that, you know, based on the number of employees we have and the way our structure is set up, that, you know, and I try to remember if we've ever really had this position in the village before. I think structures were poorly defined years ago, so I wasn't sure if we ever had someone like this before, or if it was always just done by the foreman, but I think it's a good idea, and I think it's time for it.
I think it's a good idea. I do have a question that I would like to state is, we just finished union contract negotiations, et cetera, right, with the Public Works. So is there any kind of issue with adding another layer of management with them? Or is that established anywhere in a contract, or is that any kind of issue, the title, or?
I can take that. We did just finish the collective bargaining agreement with the Public Works Union. Creating this position would not affect anything in that collective bargaining agreement. There are certain provisions that in that collective bargaining agreement which gives us the authority to create positions to do the kind of work that we're all discussing.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. District 95, I was there when they brought on Rich Bodka as their superintendent of buildings and grounds, and it was amazing what he brought to the district, and not only his expertise, but the depth of knowledge he ended up having of the buildings and their underground systems and pipelines and the spaces he would crawl into. But and even on top of that, his ability to find grants and apply for them more than justified his position. So if you could maybe just include that or highlight that as something that we'd be looking for, a trait we'd be looking for, any experience in that regard. If someone knows where to look to find those, it can easily offset the cost of this position and then some.
Maybe he wants to apply.
He's actually retiring, actually. They're bringing in his replacement. He's going to work 6 months in overlap, and then he's gone. But he's a rock star over there for sure.
Okay, other questions or comments from the board? All right, so we'll put this up for the first meeting in April for the supplemental appropriation that's necessary to make this happen.
Okay.
All right, Tim, thanks for bringing it forward. Okay, and then the last item we have, which I mentioned that we previously discussed, I think it was the February 14th meeting, which was quite a lengthy meeting. Cindy Klima had kind of made a primary introduction of the economic development plan after her meeting with stakeholders and getting to know the community. And she presented a initial presentation that night, and it was agreed that we would bring it back for several more times to vet it, to kind of work our way through that. So tonight is another one of those chances. I believe Emily's going to take the lead on making up the presentation and give us some ideas about the next possible steps and look for some direction from the board. Although I want to make it clear to the board, there's a lot of material here again tonight, and we don't have to actually decide everything tonight, which steps we're going to take, which steps we're not going to take. Trustee Kaluzny couldn't be here. I know she'll have a chance to view the PowerPoint presentation and meet with staff. So, Tim, is there anything you wanted to say to get started, or?
Real quick, you introduced the item well. We expected Cindy Klima, our Economic Development Coordinator, to be here this evening. She is the primary author of this plan. We just were informed that it was a family emergency that she has to deal with tonight, and so she is not going to be here tonight. Emily's been very directly involved working with Cindy to create this. I've been peripherally involved. Emily's going to present it. We're going to do our best to answer all your questions, but go easy on us. If we don't have answers to the questions that you raise, we will get back to you. As President Garvey said, this is not on the agenda for formal approval tonight. We understand there's a lot in here, and it may warrant further discussions, and we'll come back to you as many times as we need to. Perhaps the full board. Emily and I endorse this plan, and we've met several times about it, and we support it. And we think Cindy did a really nice job in using her expertise and experience in developing the recommendations that are contained in the plan. And so I'm going to turn over to Emily, and she's going to summarize the key components of it, and then we will do our best to answer the questions that you are undoubtedly will have.
Thank you, Emily.
Great. Thank you, President Garvey. Thank you, Tim. Cindy absolutely wishes she could be here tonight. But as Tim mentioned, I did work with her very closely on this, so I'm comfortable answering any questions about this and working with you to go through this plan, because it is quite long. So just to be prepared for what we'll be discussing tonight's agenda, we'll talk about the development of the plan, how we went from an 11-page Excel spreadsheet to something that's more digestible here that is available online, and hopefully you all have a copy on your laptops tonight while we go through it. And then we'll go through each of the 3 goals. We'll talk about the underlying objectives of each of those 3 goals. And then I just chose some highlights of the specific action items within those 3 goals. So I chose action items that are within a 6-month time frame that I will highlight after we go through each of the 3 goals. And then to wrap it up, we'll talk about immediate next steps and how we're going to track the work that we did with this plan, how we're going to track its success. All right, to talk about the development of the plan, Cindy worked very closely with a lot of different stakeholders, business owners, elected officials, staff. Cindy had a lot of conversations with many different types of people, in addition to using her experience and understanding of the surrounding region. As I mentioned, this began as something that's, it's great to track implementation, but it's not easy to digest. It's not easy to explain. So in the process of moving it from this very lengthy Excel spreadsheet to this document here, we really put a lot of thought into what action comes first, what action comes second, at what point are we ready to do these specific items. So I only bring that up to say, as we're going through this, we're happy to talk about specific action items, but know that it might be exciting to see some of the action items that are slated for 2 years out, but really it would be a misstep if we get excited about some of those items and we kind of reorient it or change the timeline that we expect to see this plan evolve. So just a heads up with that. And then underneath are all of the plans and resources and reports that were reviewed when creating this plan as a way to make sure that it prioritizes what the board has already laid out as a priority. All right. So as I mentioned, this plan was developed with a foundational approach. So really setting the foundation, getting the very first steps done first before we move on to what could be more exciting action items. And I do want to highlight one line that's up here. This is a 3-year plan. It's intended to be a living document, and it could be updated every year, but we expect to see it moved along so much so that in 3 years, we would hopefully be able to start again with an updated economic development plan. But it is a living, breathing document similar to a comprehensive plan or something like that. So we expect to come back before you within a year to just explain what progress has been made and perhaps what changes need to be made to the plan. All right, so diving into the first goal, professional and economic support. This is something that was identified pretty early on. This goal really identifies the specific need for staff to have focus on economic development. And so what that means is Cindy, working in her capacity at this temporary juncture, is an amazing asset. It's a great resource, and we had a similar agenda item previously. This is something that I definitely fully support, that there's dedicated staff time with so many things going on in our community. To have one person really focused on progressing economic development, I think is a really great recommendation. And we can talk more about that briefly in a moment. But really, this is a 2-prong approach. It's not just that economic development professional on staff, but it's also capitalizing on the resources we have in the community. So the second objective is to identify those individuals in our community and really leverage them and their willingness to promote the community and be a good community member, and really capitalize on that. So first objective is professional and economic development support. Second is to utilize what we have in the community already. And then, so to talk about specifics for that goal, again, this is something that is really slated for the first 6 months of this. I bring up the economic development professional in the first bullet point, and that's really just another opportunity to reassure the board that this isn't something that our economic development consultant put in the plan to find a way to continue to grow the business. This is definitely something that I, as staff, support, and it can look a lot of different ways. Currently, Cindy's just working part-time. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time employee that is working with it doesn't have to be staff with all of the benefits and the costs associated with the pension. This can be a role that looks a lot of different ways, and it's not necessarily Cindy. And then the second bullet point is the Economic Development Commission and Committee, and I know that's been discussed a lot. That's really going back to that second objective of looking to gather economic professional support from within the community, those that are already here that can be a great resource. The third bullet point follows in line with that. We have some amazing commissions that are very dedicated, very knowledgeable, and how do we tap into the work that they're already doing and really make that something that's in line with the plan's larger goals. And then implementation matrix, so what that looks like is simply what you see before you in the plan, and then basically checking off the list of the items that we've done to remember to not only follow a very strategic path, but to also celebrate those items that we do work through and to promote to the larger community, not only the developer community, but to the region that we are doing these great things, we're working on these projects, and we're making a lot of progress. So not just to track it, but to promote it.
In
Any
terms of the-
questions?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, she can keep going? Or
Yeah.
we can stop and ask any questions now, or if you wanna wait till the very end, what's the board?
I mean, does the board have any questions about so far, about what we've gone through so far? I mean, I know we've had this in our packet and a chance to review it over the weekend. I think we had it on Thursday, but if there's any questions now, or we can wait.
I have a question, and I'd like us to have some discussion on the commission or committee. I don't know if that's appropriate at this point, or, I mean, the question was to the economic development professional, is that you? Or is that someone different? Because it would appear that you or someone in your position is listed in a lot of places on here.
Right, yes. Yeah, I know. Go ahead.
Before, I'll let Emily answer. So I've been here 3 years. We've had 4 community development directors. I don't know what that says about me, I don't know what that says about the community, but we've had 4. All of them have struggled with, Emily's still too new, she's doing her best. I think it's too much to expect that all the things that a director of community development has to oversee, that's building, that's planning, and that's economic development, the reality is there's just not enough time in the day to really focus on those things. And in the few years I've been here, I've seen the type of things that Cindy are bringing to us, I've seen that fall through the cracks. We don't have the time, and Emily now as a director does not have the time to be doing this outreach and to really focus on the things, the relationship building and so forth that's needed to make this plan a reality. So, Trustee Ketchmark, I think the goal of the plan is to identify a person that would be a support to the director. And as Emily just said, that could be Cindy Klima's position. Remember, that's a part-time temporary position. Does not need to be. We're not here saying that it needs to be another full-time position created. It's just something that Cindy, who has experience doing this in several towns, and she worked for the Tollway Authority, she knows what it takes to make these type of things work. her point in this plan is saying you need to have somebody whose main focus is that. And I'm here to tell you as a village manager, I have not seen a director of community development that can do that, because there's other things that are demanding of now her time that leaves this stuff to fall through the cracks.
And I would just add to that, that sometimes those roles are directly opposite. Sometimes you're working with a business owner or a property owner, and you have to tell them no, and that doesn't always encourage a great relationship. But you have to be able to enforce the code when it's required, and it's very challenging to then be in that position, but turn right around and be the person that's trying to figure out a way to say yes. So not to say that it's impossible, and I love to figure out ways to say yes to our business community, but it is a tremendous asset to have someone who's solely focused on the yes.
I agree with all that. I mean, Emily, you and I have talked a little bit about this. Tim, you and I have talked quite a bit about this, and I think the position that Emily is in, and that we've had a few people in, I think we're still trying to figure out what that position is and how it evolves. And as you're talking about it right now, that makes great sense. I mean, it's a lot for one person to do, and there is conflict within there. So I think this is part of that evolution as to what we expect of that position, and I think this could work out. In terms of the committee or commission, I don't know if we want to talk about that at this point.
I think that's one of the larger asks, or larger tasks of what we're going to try and do here. So maybe, because I would like to see some more discussion or feedback on how that committee would look, or how those commissions look in other municipalities similar situated to us. I mean, we don't necessarily, I don't think we've ever looked to just reinvent the wheel. I think that could be a topic almost for itself some night, but I personally wanted to see some recommendations about what that commission versus committee, what it would look like, what it could look like, size, membership, tasks, things like that. So I don't know if we want to get into that level of detail tonight. I'll kind of leave it up to the board, or that's something when Trustee Kaluzny's back and after we've gone through some of these other things, that could be a topic for a future meeting. I did want to join in on what Trustee Ketchmark and Tim said. I mean, if you looked at, we just talked about the public works, structure and the reporting. If you looked at the structure of our community development, I mean, there's so many things that are on the community development director's plate. And when this, economic development becomes larger and faster and everything else, I only see Emily's position getting bigger and busier, because the planning and the code review and the working with the plans. Right now, again, I think everyone here is familiar with just the size of the staff, the limited inspectors we have, and, the unfortunate loss of Kendra. Emily, we're kind of dancing around that Emily is kind of taking on Kendra's, jobs right now, and we're looking to fill that. But I think out of necessity, that has to be a separate position than Emily's current position, and, could be defined by management's role and the size of it, and going forward, whether it gets bigger or smaller in the future. But I do think that clearly needs to be a separate role.
The only thing I'd comment about the creation of an EDC, I've worked in at least 3 towns that have one. And the bottom line is, what you shine a light on and what you focus on gets done. And the whole purpose of an economic development commission is, right now, our operations, due to staffing, and our commission structure, nobody is really focused on economic development. And I'm not saying that means nothing's gonna get done, but everyone's attention is always diverted away from that. The creation of an economic development commission, and I've been a part of very effective ones, I can't sit here and tell you today what they're gonna work on, but it's the power of that group. And you bring in a cross-section, the membership would be appointed by the board, be a recommendatory body to the board, just like the park board is, or plan commission, or so forth. And you'd have a representative of the banking community, the restaurant community, retail establishments, the Chamber of Commerce, and so forth. You had a cross-section of the community. It's not a situation where village staff is telling them what we need to do. It's us trying to draw from them what we need to do. What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? Where do we need to focus efforts on? Which, business districts do? It can be a very dynamic process. And the bottom line is, I'm not saying without it, economic development will not happen in the village, but I will say, I don't think it'll happen as effectively or as productively as it could if you had a group of dedicated volunteers working in conjunction with village staff to brainstorm, to bring ideas forward. We're constantly talking about communications. And I know, Trustee Hendricks went to the park on Saturday. It breaks my heart. We don't do a very good job. We don't do a good enough job communicating things to the public. And I'm not using it as an excuse that we don't have an economic development commission, so it's difficult. But the bottom line is, all of us are doing so many different things on a daily basis to focus on, in this case, economic development is really difficult. But with the use of a commission, I've seen it effectively utilized to be that kind of catalyst where it brings things to the attention of staff. We then bring it to the attention of the village board, and where it goes from there, who knows? I mean,
Well, that's why I kind of envisioned that was going to be an important step, and that's probably, we don't have one that would be something we'd be creating from scratch, where some of the other things, are identifying resources that we have now and things like this. So I was thinking that might be, I personally would like to see, something that's worked somewhere, at least the structure in terms of what the enabling ordinance is, what their charter is, what their mission statement is, the size of it, the makeup, and some examples of what that they've been able to accomplish in other towns. Because I do know that that's kind of a key recommendation or step. I know it's not, and staff has made it clear we don't have to go with that option, but I think that's one thing we'd like to see. I would like to see more detail if the board agrees.
I completely agree with President Garvey. I think that type of detail would go a long way as far as bringing in people to serve on that panel. I just know from my work with the chamber, getting small business owners to give up time for these types of things is very challenging. And the more they're involved, the more they're away from their business, and so the more they're conflicted, and then they drop off. And so finding people to run that commission is going to be challenging. So the more detail we can provide, the more insight as far as what we're looking for, I think the better results we might have. And not necessarily business owners, as you said, professionals in different areas that come together.
And my hope is that I think we would have the freedom to tailor it. No one knows this community better than we do. Just because we get a similar ordinance or a similar structure from another town, we might realize, okay, this particular structure, size, makeup, charter, mission might work better in this town. I think we could all, if we're pressed, kind of envision some of the people that would be key to a committee like this, or at least positions that would be key to committee. But let's see, I'd just like to see something about the structure. So maybe that's a topic for the next committee of the whole that comes out of this, so we can make a decision, based on that.
So a couple points. I'd like to see this as a permanent commission, same as parks, beautification, whatever. We've had the various committees over the years, the comprehensive plan committee, the whatever we are working on, we brought people forward. I think we've done this with economic development a little bit in the past too. I think we need something more with that in terms of a permanent committee with members and a liaison, et cetera. At the same time, looking down the list to the 12-month plus, it seems like there's some thought as to seeing if this is something that would turn into a standalone economic development corporation. We have had some experience with that, going back 20 years ago. CP remembers it.
I'm hearing laughing in the audience.
I don't think that worked out too well, and I think one of the issues I saw with that is we can't subcontract out economic development to a commission or economic development corporation, and I kind of had the feeling that that's maybe what was thought of this, that this commission would handle economic development. There did not seem to be a lot of liaisonship with the village, which is essential to this, because a commission working on these items has to have direct contact with village staff and what we're working on. And I think having a permanent committee is better than having, someone who can show up in a meeting and offer their ideas and then leave. I mean, there's got to be some more commitment to this, on a regular basis.
There are many more examples, and we'll come back with our research of commissions or committees set up like this. There's very few of these corporations. I only know of, I think Trustee Ketchmark is the one that, I didn't know Brookfield used to have one. The only other one in this area I know about is Berwyn has one. It's relatively unique, and I agree completely with you, and we're not, well, I'll only speak for myself, I'm not proposing that corporation. It'd be great if we got to that point that we need something like that, because we had so much going on and all the resources to be able to come up with that, but to me, that is something that is so many steps down the line, if ever, that we are just not ready for, we don't need it. I agree with you completely, the commission would be just like the plan, 1 month commitment that we're looking for commission members would be pick a day, pick a time, and then for that hour or two, that meeting would be there, and then, they'd be nothing more than recommendatory back to you all. Funnel it through staff, we'd have a staff liaison, and they would be passing the recommendations, policies, or outreach, or whatever, that you all would ultimately be directing it.
Which I think is the key, where the commission, just like our commissions now, put forward different ideas, and it comes to us and we talk about them, and maybe we send it back to tweak it, whatever. Much different than a standalone. You mentioned you didn't know we had one corporation, we actually had two. And we had two because somebody who didn't like how the one was going decided to start their own commission, which is, because then it's seen that it isn't a village body, it's a separate thing that people can be part of, that kind of get rid of the whole point of it. So I think, having the direct contact with the village is important. I don't see that you have that with the corporation.
If we set up a commission or committee, it'd be an amendment to the village code. It would be created by code, just like all the other commissions would be. You'd work with the village attorney. You would be approving just like as the type of research you're asking for. We'd include that in the ordinance, so that there's no playing around with that. I mean, it's the code, and it would be the village code, and the village board would define the composition of the commission, the type of people that would be on it, when they meet, how often they meet, what their role would be, so it would be structured.
And I think the structure is the key, and to Trustee Conroy's point, people, if people are going to get involved, they want to know what their commitment is, what their role is, what their powers are, what they can do, what they can't do, and, we want to make it clear that we value their time, and this is what we're asking them to do, and, we've gotten much better, I think, with the commissions and committees over the past years, where with the staff liaisons and the board liaisons, we try and make sure that their agendas reflect things that the board is interested in moving forward. We don't want them spending time on things that, so that's where the staff and direction from the board comes in, because Trustee Conroy, you bring up a very good point. The people who would be most important to this commission are already some of the busiest people in town, but we need their experience, their expertise, their institutional knowledge, so we got to make it worth their while and make them sure we know that their time is valuable and define their roles clearly. So I think if we do create a commission, the creation of that commission will be key, and the wording of the enabling ordinance will be key. So I think that's something we really want to talk about.
Absolutely. What Trustee Ketchmark was describing, that is the intent in this plan for any kind of commission or committee. It would be permanent, it would have a staff liaison, it would have very clear boundaries and very clear structure moving forward. It would also, I want to point out, it's a working committee or commission. It's an organization, a body that is actively participating and that has to happen in order for that two-way communication to happen from the village to the village, back and forth. And I also just want to suggest that it seems like this is something that the board wants to see more details on and wants to see how it's done in other communities. So if the board is comfortable with this suggestion in general, whether that's tonight or in 2 weeks from now, and you want to move the plan forward, I can guarantee that this kind of a action item would definitely come back with more details before it moves forward. So that's certainly another avenue to move forward. But it sounds like there's a lot of requests, so whether that's at the next committee of the whole or after that.
However much, I don't want to put a 2-week time, how much, however time you need to bring, I think there's a consensus that everyone wants more information on this type of option. So whatever time it takes to get the detail that we would want to see,
Okay.
let's bring it back. I mean, we've, waited on this, worked on this economic development idea forever. We're going to want to do it right. So whether it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, let's just, as much time as you need to give us the detail we want. And if we need more detail after that, we're going to ask for more detail after that.
Sounds good. Any other questions or discussion on this? All right. So moving on to goal 2, business support. This is really something that's pretty easy, focuses on business retention and business attraction. So again, there's a lot of overlap in these strategies with the other goals because it's such a basic principle. But it really is something that improves the quality of life for the residents and the community members by adding additional services and amenities. And this is something that really has a lot of potential, especially in the business attraction arena, because attracting businesses that may have a certain sector that is lacking in the community is not only providing the economic development support, but it's providing that amenity to the residents and to the community. So whatever business sector may have a void in the community, by really targeting and actively recruiting that particular sector, that's a major component of objective 2. All right, so to look at some of the 6-month highlights for this particular goal, collect and analyze business data. That is something, to be frank, we have not done extremely well in my department. And so we have really already started working on that. One example that we've already started to work on is getting better information about our restaurants, our bars, and our areas with coffee and treats. We want to have a very up-to-date business database to have specific communications for those kinds of institutions. So outdoor seating, outdoor cafes, it's getting nicer. We want to be prepared. And so just working on that very basic kind of database to collect property owner information as well as business owner information, and then maintain it. That's another critical component, because businesses, they may close, they may change ownership. So collecting and analyzing, that's just one example, the restaurants, bars, and coffee shops that we've already begun to gather that data on. And then the second bullet point, direct outreach to property owners to market to future tenants. So that's something that we want to prioritize in this plan, not just the larger areas for development, the available development properties, but also to ensure that the tenant spaces that we do have are fully occupied, that they're occupied in a way that meets the zoning code and contributes to the economic vitality of each of the commercial corridors. The third bullet point is collect and add available properties list, including tenant spaces. So that is in alignment with the second bullet point, just really maximizing the tenant spaces and the commercial spaces that we already have, and working very closely with local businesses and property owners to ensure that those spaces are occupied to their greatest potential. And the last bullet point here, you'll see this is on the 6-month time frame. Developer and broker tours with on-site visits. This is something that the village has done in the past, but one additional twist on this particular action item is to make the developer breakfast, developer tour really specific to a site that is ready for development, and also to strategically follow up after you hold that event. So looking to really hone in on a specific site that is ready the next day to begin a development process, and then to have that very strategic follow-up. So those things would be different than what the village has seen in the past, even though past developer breakfasts or developer outreaches have been a great one-day event. We haven't seen a lot of follow-through based on some of those events in the past. So that's one action item that is within the 6-month timeframe, but would certainly need a lot of work to make sure that when that event occurs, that it's done correctly and that there can be a very quick follow-up that results in something after that.
And just, looking at the other action items, there's, under the 6 to 12 month, there's 17 action items in the 6 to 12 month period. And if you look at that, it kind of goes back to my original, and Trustee Ketchmark's original point of all of these things are kind of falling under Emily's purview at this point in time. From revising the business license application to, gather information and revising the planning and zoning design controls and things. These are things that Emily has been and is working on. So I think that further shows the need for, at least another person to be doing this on an additional basis. And just noting some of the, we talk about some things and it seems like we're doing everything in isolation, but, this board made the commitment to the GIS software program and investing in that, and how you could see how that fits in with so many of these action items and bullet points in terms of creating the inventory and the data that we need. So while someone might not see the GIS investment as an economic development tool, I think Emily would tell you it's one of the best tools that she has at her disposal and will help these other things. And by building the database, we don't have a good database to start, but we have the database, and then the database is easily updated or editing. We're kind of starting at that ground floor of creating the database of properties, owners, things like this. And then once we have it, when there's a change, it's easier to update. So, you're looking at 17 action items in the 6 to 12 month period. A lot of these are works in progress already and are going to be accelerated by the resources that we've provided to staff already and some of the action items that we've already talked about. I know that, there's talk in here about updating, parking codes and things. And as Trustee Hendricks pointed out, that's something the Planning and Zoning Commission, looked at the other night. So a lot of these action items are in place and moving forward already, so.
Absolutely.
Couple thoughts. To the developer and broker tours. For a couple of years there, we had done the developer breakfast, we had done the realtor breakfast. The realtor breakfast, I don't know that we quite figured that out and where we were going with that. But the developer breakfast, what was interesting, and we'd get 40 to 50 developers here for an hour, and we could put a face on the village of Brookfield and who the staff was that they would deal with and kind of what's going on in the town. And, you heard a lot of the diamond and the rough come from that group. We didn't do much with that, after we had those breakfasts. But it was, and that's something we could do or could have done. But I'm wondering if we were doing on-site tours, visits, if you attract that group that maybe isn't interested in that particular thing, that would be interested in something else, or, maybe there's a way you do both of those things. Because I tell you, the hour we spent with these people sure seemed like it was worth it. And I think a couple of those, developers have gone on to build projects here in town. But people don't necessarily know who we are. Putting that face on it, and, here's our village manager, here's our economic development director, this is the staff, this is the person you would turn a permit into. And they see that we're real people, we're organized, and it's a very professional organization. I think that goes a long way. The other thing, I'm not clear on the first point, where you talked about, analyzing, collecting more of the data on the, are you talking about keeping up to date on what's open and what they do, or trying to get more data from those who are open?
Both of those, yes. Keeping better track of, especially with the My GIS tool, keeping better track of the tenant spaces that are available and who the best contact is for those tenant spaces. Keeping better track of the details for our available properties and how we're going to market those to specific developers, individuals.
But are we
So-
talking about available properties or, because it talked about the revise the business applications to get more needed information for effective economic development database?
Yes, so that one simple example is we're looking to get not just contact information via phone, but also an email, and make sure that that's really prioritized. And not only an email, but looking to get just the business's website. What is the best way to look at the services that your business provides, and then make sure that we're regularly referring back to that.
So it doesn't just go to business attraction, it also goes to the objective of business retention. If we know more about our businesses and what they do and what their
Exactly.
issues are. So it goes to both objective 1 and 2 is the point?
Absolutely. Correct, yeah. Did that answer?
Yep,
Yeah,
thank you.
okay, Yeah.
Other questions or comments from the board at this point? Okay.
All right. Goal 3, promote quality of life and businesses. This is one that is really exciting in the way that this is not just about numbers, it's not just about looking at sales tax, looking at decreasing vacancies. It's also about improving quality of life, making Brookfield an even more attractive Brookfield to those looking to move here and to move their business here. And promoting the assets that we already have, really increasing the quality of life for residents, for businesses, for the community at whole. So this is a goal that also focuses on what makes Brookfield unique, what is our competitive advantage. So you can see in objective 3, it highlights the natural open spaces, the parks and the recreation. That's something that not every community our size has a great amenity. And then objective 2 speaks to that same community character, to really focus in on what is the community character, how can we elevate that and encourage that throughout the community. And objective 3 looks at Brookfield's visibility to the greater region. So how can we promote that and raise awareness to all of the things that are already happening in Brookfield, to the larger development community, to the larger community of folks looking to relocate. How do we raise awareness of Brookfield and what we already have?
The only thing I'd add to that, and Trustee Ketchmark said it, I am so tired of, we had lunch last week with a commercial broker that Emily knew about. And he said the comment, I think he used the term, there's a diamond in the rough. Nobody knows about it. I am so tired of hearing that. Like, yeah, I know it's a diamond. Well, we need to get the word out more. We need to figure out a way to better communicate the story that is Brookfield and the possibilities and the opportunities that are here. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about in this plan, is that if we do this and pursue this, we will have to stop. My goal is to never hear that again. That, oh, Brookfield is a lot of possibilities, there's diamond in the rough. No, we know that. We want you to know that and spread the word about it.
But Tim, also realize, and I mean, you've been here a few years, some of us have been on board for some time. It's been an evolution getting us to this point, too. You know, where the topics we're having now, we couldn't have had 10 years ago. And I mean, that goes to everything from our comprehensive plan to the infrastructure improvements to the professional organization that's been put in place. I mean, it's all part of it. So, yeah, we're all getting annoyed with that, but we have done a lot of work to get us to the point where we can get annoyed by hearing.
I get it. My annoyance is, this is a good story to tell. And
It is.
we just got to get the word out more effectively than we are right now. We need to do better. And hopefully this will help guide us. I feel like I'm herding cats half the time. You know, we're always, well, let's chase this, or let's go chase that, or let's go do that. But there's very little, I get frustrated in the fact that it's not very focused, and it's not very data-driven, it's not so forth, but it needs to happen, and I think it will happen.
And I think we have a lot to work with. And just in terms of, businesses and quality, I mean, we have some really, we have some of the best, we have one of the best Little League fields around. We have the parks, we have the Historical Society, we have the Salt Creek that no one else has, and the development that we've kind of, done with that. We have, I've been doing this for a while. When I first got involved, everyone told them I was the village president of Brookfield, and they said the zoo. Now people talk about things like, the Galloping Ghost Arcade. They talk about Burger Antics. They talk about the great barbecue place of the Eight Corners. These Irish Times is known by my friends all over DuPage County and other counties. It's like we do have destination places where it's not just Brookfield residents, Paisans, the other businesses, Mary's Morning Mix-Up. I mean, we have people from other towns coming here, and, trying to get a parking space on Grand Boulevard is a bit of a problem on some nights, and that's actually a good thing to see, and that's something that we want. So we've done something right to get to this point. It's just, we can definitely do better and market it better. And some of the, the assets I just mentioned in terms of businesses and infrastructure, we also have great people and organizations. I mean, the Bike Brookfield organization, that's Cycle Brookfield has been very, I think, growing and growing and growing, and I know it's attracting people from outside of Brookfield to this area. And our bike-friendly ordinances and the creation of, bike assets in terms of, bike repair stations and making it easily accessible by creating bike lanes and things like this, that's attracting a new, different crowd of people or making it more accessible. So I think it's, Trustee Ketchmark's point is we've done a lot to get to this point, and now it's maybe marketing it and getting a message out there and getting the next step, but we've come a long way. We do, I think there's a lot of excitement because we have a lot to work with here, so.
Absolutely, yeah, not to discredit all the work that's brought us to this point, but really to capitalize on all of the work that's brought us to this point and tell that story. The Brookfield story tells itself. I think all of the items that you mentioned, it's a tremendous community, and we just need to do an even better job of getting the word out to the right people.
And one of the key things about this, this whole bullet point or the strategy is, I mean, it's the, it's actually going back to the previous one, the business retention and business attraction. We do want to attract new businesses, and, it's funny how that's changed over the years, the business attraction goal, because, I mean, years ago, we sat on the board and we would listen how, why did LaGrange get the Borders books, and why didn't we get a Borders books? I mean, Borders books is long gone in LaGrange, it doesn't exist. We have to look at the post-COVID needs of what we attract, and we have some very key longtime businesses that we need to and want to retain and can help them do that. And I think that goes then into this goal of promoting the quality of life in businesses. We have to make our business owners have a quality of life where they want to and can stay here and invest in their business. So I think by promoting and helping them market, each of these goals kind of flows into the next one, so.
Yes, absolutely, yes, there's a lot of overlap here, and they all relate. So just looking at some of the highlights for this goal, creating mechanisms and process for all modes of communication. So that's making sure that we take the next step in the social media presence that we have, making sure we're communicating effectively via email or in-person communications to our local businesses on whatever the topic may be, and being really strategic with that. And part of that relates back to collecting that data and analyzing it and maintaining that data to make sure we know who we need to talk to, but also just being really, like I said, strategic about how we get that communication out. And the second bullet point is the Enjoy Brookfield website. So this is something that's not just a website. This was something that the board previously approved to work with Beeline Marketing to develop not just this website, but really this broader campaign. This is a campaign that is to enjoy Brookfield beyond the zoo, that really tells the story of these local businesses and the community in general. So currently, the website itself has a lot of the community's businesses there, and we're looking to continue to add to that and elevate that, as well as build out the community calendar that's on there currently. So we would like to work with all of the stakeholders and all of the community members to hear what great events they're having in the community. There are so many events that unless you're listening to a board meeting and you're hearing about a specific community event coming up, you might not get that information. So really creating one destination website for a lot of various events in the community will really promote that campaign in general to enjoy Brookfield. And then improved walking and biking infrastructure. This is something that Brookfield, I think, is positioned really well to move forward on with the active transportation plan and the various plans for infrastructure improvements. But again, going back to what President Garvey mentioned, this is something that improves the quality of life for not just the residents, but also those business owners that want to live in an area that's great to live in and that's close to their business. And promote community assets distinctive to Brookfield. That's really capitalizing on some of the items that are Brookfield's competitive advantage. Not every community has a brand new, beautiful canoe launch, has access to Salt Creek and to the local businesses. So really focusing on that and telling that story. Any questions, comments, and items of discussion for this goal?
Well, I mean, I think this is a good summary of, a lot of the assets we have and things. I mean, this summer, I think the town is gonna be, booming. We look forward to the live music on Grand Boulevard and just, seeing last year, I know there was a lot of pent-up demand, but the concerts in the park, I mean, that's another great asset we have is our parks and recreation and special events programs. The concerts in the park last year were the largest attendance I've seen in all the years. I know, and it was every kind of music. I mean, Stevie and the staff, special events staff did a great job of getting diverse music. But it was a lot of it was the same people out there every time. They just wanted to be out in the park and, the bandstand and any, improvements that we can make to the park. And I know we've talked about improving the experience on Grand Boulevard with, in terms of making sure there's proper seating and garbage and pickup and even the proper, better barricades and more attractive things like that. I mean, those are things that, people are just ready to get out and be all over Brookfield. So I think those are, things that we've talked about are exciting. And, the crowds at the farmer market, CP's thumb hurts from counting the people at the farmer's market every morning because it's getting bigger and bigger. And I think those are just key attractions that we have. And when people come for that and see other things, we have to have the marketing and things in place. And obviously the budget relates to some of this. I mean, at some point we're going to need to up the marketing budget and things, but I mean, it's almost, I think there's another step before that to improve the Enjoy Brookfield website and the other materials and resources we have. And then at some point, we're going to need to make a bigger investment in marketing. I'm sure that's a recommendation that will be coming forward in the future, so. Any other questions or comments from the board? Trustee Hendricks?
Can I say something about the whole, what we've gone over tonight as a whole? I thank you for bringing this all and explaining it all so clearly. There are 2 points for me that I think really stand out. One is that I wholeheartedly agree with our need for an economic development professional aside from Emily. I absolutely agree that it's too big a job for one person, and the idea of having one person to take on staff to take ownership of this plan and guiding the implementation of it, I think is critical to seeing it implemented. The other item is the implementation matrix. It's a way, if the plan were to come back to us every 6 months, like this is on a 6-month schedule, essentially 6 to 12 months. If it came back to us every 6 months with updates saying, look, this is what we've accomplished so far and what we want to do in the next 6 months, I think that helps the board to take ownership, and it helps keep this in front of the community because it is that important. We've done that with the comprehensive plan, like everything that comes in front of the Plan Commission and every planning and zoning item that comes before us. Staff tells us this is how it fits or doesn't with our comprehensive plan and our goals. And that really helps us to achieve our goals, I think. So the implementation matrix, I think, is critical. But thank you for putting us all together and helping to clarify some of it tonight.
I would agree with Trustee Hendricks. I don't think this is a bullet point on a job description.
Yep, we agree. And that's kind of the way it's being done right now.
Right.
That's one bullet point. That's literally what it is. It's a bullet point that I yell at her. Like I keep saying, when you bring a Costco to Brookfield, when's Costco coming? I'm joking, but it's a small segment of her overall job that is not going to do it justice.
And Emily, as I point out, Emily's job will only get bigger as we grow in terms of economic development. And even after Kendra's position is filled, I mean, Emily's still going to have, I mean, if this works right, Emily's going to be busier than ever with this. So, I mean, I think there's a clear consensus on that point from the board.
Our goal is to have a parking, huge parking demand, parking problems in downtown. Because that's a sign that you're in demand. And that I know there are limited days and times where there's no parking downtown, but my goal is that we have to build a parking lot. Start with a parking lot, then maybe someday a parking garage, and then someday, because that means that things are happening and demand is thriving.
So next steps?
Some of these steps we're already working on, building out that business database, especially for the strategic businesses that need communications now, like the restaurants and bars that I mentioned. We're working on available properties because we do want to be responsive to folks that are calling us and they need a specific size tenant space for a specific use. We want to not have to wait to get them an answer for where they could be located. So working on all of these to some degree, but hoping to get an official resolution to approve this, to hit the ground running even more with all of these items.
And you know, the PIP program is up there, and I mean, I think the projects we've done have been successful. Has there been any feedback as to why more people aren't reaching out to? Is there any recommended tweaks or adjustments that we want to make to? I mean, I know we have more money that we can invest in that. Is there anything feedback that we've gotten that, well, if this type of project was available, I mean, I know the board would be open to any revisions or recommendations on how to change the program if it would, get more projects that, obviously met the need of what we want to do. We just don't want to put money out there for anything. But if, people say, well, I was thinking about doing this, but it doesn't fit the strict guidelines of the PIP program, I mean, are we looking at that?
I haven't heard that as much as I have heard, oh, I didn't realize this was available. What do I do to move this forward? It takes a lot of staff time to explain the options and to help a person that is not an architect, is not well-versed in facade renovations, to really envision what their property could be and explain the process of how that impacts the larger commercial community.
Has the newsletter hit your houses yet? The next,
I don't think
I'll
that.
give you a little sneak peek. In the Brookfielder, we have a nice article that talks about some of the successes of the PIP program. And so I've heard what Emily just said. Well, I didn't know about it. So we're gonna highlight a couple of businesses that have taken part of the PIP program, and we're hoping that every business gets we're not hoping every business gets the newsletter. So I'm hoping that kind of informs the business community, if you're in a TIF district, that this exists, and hopefully will engender more applications coming up in the future.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board at this point? Emily, do you have anything else in terms of, this was and thank you for the presentation tonight and the materials ahead of time. I mean, the board, like I said, the board has access to this. I had it earlier in the week, and the board has access to all the recommended action steps and the detail. And I think the matrix of steps and follow-up and feedback is very important. Obviously, one of the next, I think we should talk about the committee structure at, an upcoming committee of the whole meeting, and give the rest of us a chance to digest this a little bit more. And Trustee Kaluzny, I know, will have a chance to look at this, and I know she said she was going to listen to the board meeting, watch the board meeting to get some feedback and meet with staff. So I'll talk to Tim and Emily about when we can, I don't want to rush it back in 2 weeks if it's not going to be, ready, and the timing of the agenda, what other items have to be up, but we'll try and move this forward.
We should probably talk about the head count, possible addition, whether it'd be a part-time, full-time employee.
In terms of the position?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tim will probably come forward with some type of recommendation. I think there's been a clear consensus from the board that some type of economic development professional position will be needed going forward. And right now, I mean, Cindy's in that position, and I think Tim and Emily can come back with recommendations about how that position might change, whether Cindy stays on, someone else comes on. I think that's something that Tim and Emily will come back to us with the recommendation on it. That could be another committee topic. Correct, is that correct, Tim?
Yes.
Okay. All right, is there anything else the board saw or thinks is lacking, or, you know, I mean, I think we've set up the next couple of discussion items that we're gonna talk about going forward, and if you're like me, you're already thinking about, you know, possible structure of the committee, people that could be involved in other areas, and think, you know, we talked about a lot tonight, and we can move forward with some stuff in the next couple of meetings, so, okay? Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you, Tim.
Welcome.
That ends the items we have up for discussion on the committee of the whole. I'll then open up to public comment again. Anybody on my right? Anybody on my left? There's no need for executive session, correct?
Right.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole at 7:53 PM.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by trustee Cote, second by trustee Conroy. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Aye.
Trustee Cote?
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks?
Aye.
Trustee Conroy?
Aye.
And Trustee Leclerc?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned at 7:54 PM. Thank you for coming.